guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Daz.
Collectively we are two of the Office Blokes.
Yep.
One of the other Office Blokes, Office Bloke Mike, accidentally mentioned the war, and you know what happens when you mention
It's
the
the
war.
£1.50.
Yeah, Office Bloke Mike's just on holiday at the moment, but don't worry, he will be back soon.
Has he gone to Germany?
He's not allowed in Germany anymore.
Too far for him, that anyway.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Wales maybe, or York. That's about it. We've got a Patreon page. Head to patreon.com, type in Office Blokes React. We've got loads of block content there that isn't on YouTube. We've also got a weekly podcast that we do, also exclusive to Patreon. It starts at £1.50 or $2 a month.
Yep. Cheap as chips.
That's 4 podcasts a month and loads of Key and Peele
There's
reactions that are blocked.
Yeah.
And
For $1.50, which is approximately $2 US.
yeah, cheap as chips, as Mike says. Anyway, I've been curious about this for a long time. How do German schools teach about World War II?
I've never thought about it.
Have you never thought about it?
No.
I've always thought with Germany being such high achievers on the world stage nowadays that was a direct overcompensation for the atrocities in World War II.
Yeah. I've been to Germany loads of times and I absolutely love the place.
I love
the
German
people.
people.
And the people are great.
Yeah.
Great sense of humour. Very direct and funny.
Yeah.
And I have a whale of a time when I go over there. I love it.
I've never been to Germany, but I've met a lot of Germans. Always got on with them.
Yeah.
Always liked them. But that's why I'm curious, because it's like only 70 years ago or 80 years ago, mortal enemies.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. And I presume, because in Berlin they've got monuments and stuff.
I've been to Berlin. Yeah.
But Checkpoint Charlie's still there. There's a Holocaust memorial there.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot. So I presume it's not talked about, if you know what I mean. It's got to be in the public psyche.
Was Checkpoint Charlie? I mean, I've been to Checkpoint Charlie. It's one of the most disappointing things you'll ever see in your life. It's just like
said that before.
It's like a toll booth in the middle of the road. But I wasn't sure. Was that to do with the war, or was that to do with the Berlin Wall?
Well, the Berlin Wall was established after the Second World War.
Right.
To split between the Soviet Union and the West.
Eastern Bloc and the West, wasn't
and then
it?
Checkpoint Charlie was the checkpoint between the two, wasn't it?
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it was to do with the war as such.
No, but it was a direct
from
consequence
result.
of the war,
yeah.
Anyway, so let's get into it. How did German schools teach about World War II? Let's do it.
After World War II, the German state was utterly destroyed. It was split in 4 parts, and to top it all, coming face to face with the scale of the atrocities their government and armies committed through public events like the Nuremberg trials. This, in combination with the process of denazification, which can be seen as a large-scale rehabilitation program, and the regaining of independence, albeit as 2 states, helped the German people in the 50s to begin looking towards the future, burying the past. It was not just a lost war, which people can accept while still feeling proud about their deeds during it, as perhaps the French used to view Napoleon's efforts, which ended in defeat, or Austria's defeats in the 7 Years' War. Rather, in this case, the sensation after the war seems to have been similar to a person regaining their senses after having committed acts of violence under the influence, akin to a crowd cheering for a football team or other such instances of mob mentality which all humans are susceptible. Naturally, given all the revelations after the war and the atrocities committed, the Germans collectively wanted nothing more than to forget and focus on new goals. First the economy, which led to the German economic miracle, and then on the foundation of the European Union, of which in the coming decades it would arguably become the leading country. But what about the history books in school? After all, typical after any conflict, whether a given side is the winner or the loser, the history taught in schools tends to be coloured to favour one's own people. This, however, could not happen in Germany. The reasons for this were varied, from making sure something like that couldn't happen again, and of course the scale of the atrocities on a global level and the small time gap that separates us from those events and how well documented those events are. This brings us to the broad strokes of how this particular conflict was and is taught in German schools. We should point out here that in Germany the education system is regulated not by the federal government but independently in each of the 16 states that constitute the German Federal Republic, or BRD. So the way history is taught, although generally falling within the same lines, can vary a lot from region to region. For example, the choice of literature used in the various classes differs greatly, not only from year to year but also from federal state to federal state. That caveat out of the way, the study of the war period and how this is viewed in Germany German schools can be generally divided into 4 parts. The first, the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic, at least its beginnings, are generally viewed positively. It is seen as a first decent effort towards democratization, despite the problems that it faced in the aftermath of World War I. The various problems culminating in the economic crisis of the late 20s and the subsequent rise of the Nazi regime are dealt with in detail, emphasizing the mistakes that would lead to the fall of the democratic system. One would say that the Weimar Republic, despite the brevity of its existence, is viewed with a certain nostalgic sentiment, accompanied by the looming threat of what was to come. And that
It's just dawned on me, this is probably going to be really matter-of-fact, isn't it? I feel like they're going to teach it quite matter-of-fact as well, the Germans.
Yeah, but I also like the idea of 16 different boards independently looking after the education systems rather than the federal government.
I agree.
That'd be good. That'd work better here.
School education, I think, like primary school, high school, is pretty decent in this country, but I think as soon as you get into colleges and universities, they're so...
I'm not sure.
But they're not regulated by the government.
Ofcom. Is it who does the...
UCAS. It depends on the governing body, doesn't it, for
I can't
schools?
remember who it is now. Can't remember. It's not Ofcom, right?
No,
What do
that's
they do?
the TV. That's when people complain because someone on the BBC says a naughty word.
I thought it was. I can't remember who regulates it now, but whoever it is,
ACAS?
yeah, I think that's the union. But anyway, I mean, because like for example, when I went to school, it got closed down, and the kids were just putting other schools close by. They never built a new school or tried to fix the school because it was shit. But
Just went no.
just closed. Just went everyone out.
You can't just
closing.
say everyone out, get some new teachers and a new headmaster in, and that'd be that.
Yeah.
Got to tear the building down, forget it ever
The
happened.
building's just derelict now. It's all run down and derelict.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's not just the war, but the Nazis themselves and their ideology. Nazi ideology and atrocities. Head-on, the students are confronted with the crushing effects of totalitarian regimes, radical ideologies, and where these can lead. In addition to photo and video documentaries, most schools organize mandatory school trips to Holocaust memorials, usually former concentration camps. This does not only apply to history class. Students are also introduced to the works of literature tackling the issue of Nazism and ethnic hate in Europe at the time.
When you're saying there, Dave, just to answer your question, he actually pointed out before that it'd have to be a case of a matter of fact, the way it's taught, because it's so modern.
Yes.
It's then well documented. There has to be.
Yeah.
You can't sort of like paper over this and sort of like say, well, you know, give it to change the subject a little bit to sort of like suit the...
It's just that so many of them must have grandparents that fought in the war. And I get you can rationalise it that your granddad was a soldier fighting for his country, but then there's so many people whose grandparents could have been SS or complicit in the Holocaust and stuff. But there's no other way than to be matter of fact, is there? Because it's so well documented. And I don't think anyone of the German population wants anything like that to happen again.
Oh, absolutely. No one in the world wants it to happen again, but it's... I mean, our grandparents were in the... both my grandparents were in World War II.
So my granddad was.
Yeah, so it's kind of like... Because it's so modern, it has to be matter of fact. That's the...
Yeah.
That's it. You can't
Can't
paper it to
sugarcoat
it,
it
yeah,
or
to,
pretend something didn't happen.
because it's too modern.
My granddad he was a motorbike courier for the army in Egypt during the Second World War, and he was given a handgun with no bullets, and they basically said to him, if you get caught by the enemy, point the gun at him and shout bang.
Does that work?
Yeah, apparently that's a phenomenon in war, that people will point their guns that are panicking and just shout bang and not shoot. And not know, you know, they're that overwhelmed by the situation. Some people are just shouting bang, bang, bang.
My granddad was in Burma.
Oh, really?
In the jungles, yeah, and he was frontline.
Rough.
He had some stories, though.
Yeah.
Great stories.
Yeah.
Can include, but is not limited to, authors such as Bertolt Brecht and Thomas Mann. Additionally, Jewish voices are amplified in terms of Jewish poetry, reports from survivors, and historical documentaries focusing on the long-term consequences of hate and violence. Some of the literature choices indicate that the schools try to emphasize the aspects of humanity and also the problem of group mentality and prejudice, as seen in works such as the post-war play Andorra by Max Frisch and more recent works such as The Boy in the Striped Pajamas from 2006 by John Boyne and The Reader by Bernhard Schlink. They also
I bought The Boy in Striped Pajamas, the book, but it's literally sat on a shelf ever since I bought it. I went through a phase of reading loads and then bought it, and I was like, I've not read a book since. It's been about 3 years since I picked up a book.
Look at the diaries of Anne Frank. Excerpts of pro-Nazi texts are also studied once the students are deemed mature enough to handle this. In this vein, excerpts from Mein Kampf are tackled in advanced history class, stressing the contradictions within the text, what contemporary citizens might have identified with, and the lack of morality therein. Interestingly,
Don't want to keep pausing it too quick, but what a really mature way to handle it.
Yeah.
Rather than just banning it outright and just being... It's a forgotten thing.
Correct, yeah.
You're taking excerpts from it, like he said, and the kids can all sit round, read it, put it in context, debate it. That's really good. I don't think that'd ever happen over here. Not with something as controversial as that.
This is a big event, isn't it, that happened? So it's, and like you say, that's controversial. I'm not sure.
I think you need very, very mature kids to be able to sit round and debate things like that.
Did you ever see the video of the Christmas?
Yeah.
I think the kid got the Mein Kampf book.
Yeah, he wanted Minecraft. It's such a great video. The granddad's just there.
to complement Nazi ideology with a similar type of prejudice, the other major topic focused on intensely is that of slavery, racism, and segregation in America. The war itself. Remarkably, the details of the fields of war are often underplayed in German schools. A possible reason for this is that showing maps of expanding German territory during the first 2 years of the war and discussing their winning battles might cause encouragement of nationalistic pride, which seems counterproductive to many given the points that educators are trying to teach. Furthermore, the discussion of the details of each battle that Rommel won or lost in Africa, or the supply problems on the Eastern Front, are not vital to the analysis of the atrocities of the Nazi regime. Another more practical aspect is that already much time has been allocated to the subject of war anyway, so they cut down on the actual battles. Of course, one downside of de-emphasizing this is many German students are never really made aware of many specific military events and conquests, since most emphasis in school is put on the internal developments, theoretical or philosophical aspects, and of course on the ideology and practice of ethnic cleansing and the ruthlessness to other groups of people seen as ethnic, cultural, or political outcasts, such as Jews, homosexuals, communists, etc. The result is that the military developments of war are understated, as alluded to. The result is that, shockingly, many German students are actually surprised to learn things like that Germans invaded places like modern Ukraine, modern Serbia, and Greece. In contrast to these broader war strokes, resistance against the Nazi regime within Germany is heralded as an example of heroism and bravery, one such example being the siblings Sophie and Hans Scholl, members of the resistance group the White Rose. Such examples allow German students to find figures from the wartime with whom they can identify with. On this note, not every regular German who lived in the 1930s and 40s is painted as a terrible person. After all, when dealing with such a large group, as in any populace, there are plenty of good people and a percentage of bad. That said, given all that happened, a large emphasis is put on even most of the good people being complicit in the atrocities by looking away and not doing anything to stop it. Defeat in post-war.
I sort of think that as well. I think the general population knew exactly what was going on during the war.
Yeah.
I don't think you could have not known.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
You can't just round up all your neighbours and put them on trains and people go, oh yeah, they're just off to, they're going on holiday or something.
yeah.
It's a rough one. I remember going to a hotel in Austria years ago on a snowboarding holiday, and on the mantelpiece was a really old photograph of an officer, Second World War officer, black and white photograph, and you could easily tell on the picture where emblems had been removed from the photograph. Yeah. So there was like it was an SS uniform basically, but there was just got rid of airbrushed out the SS
big Nike swoosh.
Yeah, Adidas instead.
The major destructions in Germany and the high cost of human lives during the war is not attributed to the Allies, but rather to the Nazi regime itself, which is being viewed as the perpetrator in starting an unnecessary war in the first place. Furthermore, most of the destruction on German soil was inflicted in the last year of the war. The obstinacy of not surrendering, even as it was clear that the outcome of the war would be negative, is seen as proof of the minimal care the Nazis expressed toward their own people. The suicide of members of the party, such as Himmler and Hitler himself, is seen as an act of cowardice on their part. Thus, rather unique in history, the opposing forces who were victorious are not generally seen in a negative light by those they defeated. Far from it. On that note, the occupation of the German cities by the Allied army is characterized as liberation. This is despite, of course, the fact that the Allied soldiers at the time didn't seemingly view the race to Berlin as a race to free Berlin. The choice of words, however, comes with the emphasis that by losing the war, the German people were freed from Nazism. An interesting example comes from alternative history broadcasts that contemplate a world after supposed German victory. These paint a horrific dystopia in which the Germans, as well as the occupied people, would be suppressed by a ruthless Nazi regime. The 8th of May is therefore known as the Day of Liberation. Making parallels to the way the European Renaissance supposedly liberated the medieval people, the liberation as well as the denazification process led to an internal catharsis among Germans concerning Nazism. Reflecting all of this in popular German cinema, German war films, especially in the last few decades, tend to deal with the subject with honesty, showing the gradual shift to madness caused by hollow masked illusions, often in a tone more fatalistic than heroic. Therefore, they can be much deeper than a typical war movie, and if you're up for that, you might enjoy work such as the Generation War miniseries. There's also the movie The Fall, perhaps mostly known thanks to the most meme-ified Hitler scene ever. Of course, one major issue...
I've seen that scene so many times and never seen the movie that it's from.
No.
Gets used for absolutely everything, doesn't it?
Of all this in the way it's taught in schools and extreme emphasis placed on this period of history is the subject of imposed collective responsibility on modern Germans, even if just implied or felt rather than ever explicitly stated. At first glance, it is good to study these events in great detail to make sure they don't happen again. However, an issue for Germans, of course, is the sense of collective responsibility, despite no student today or their parents or even potentially their grandparents having anything to do with any of that. How much weight does the idea of original sin have? How is a person born in the 2000s responsible for the Nazi atrocities? It is still heavily frowned upon to display the modern-day German flag, despite officially and explicitly not being a Nazi symbol. On a similar note, a nationalistic display such as pledging allegiance to the flag during class every morning would have the worst possible connotations in Germany, despite being common in places like the United States. Furthermore, there is a high percentage of population with immigrant heritage. Just look at the German national football team. As you might expect from all of this, there is some concern that the German school systems may go too far with the seeming obsession with the Nazis and all the mistakes that they were making, instead of spending more time on broader history, as is more typical in other nations. Whatever one's opinion on that, as an interesting little side note, the German denazification process was considered such a success that decades later Americans sought to apply the same methodology after occupying Iraq. Unsurprisingly, that was not exactly successful. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below.
That was really interesting.
Yeah.
He's got an amazing voiceover voice as well, hasn't he?
He lost me a little bit with his voice.
It was a very
up and down pitch. It was like the pitch on it was constantly up and down. It sort of like lost me a little bit.
I mean, very, very interesting topic, like I say, because I grew up watching war movies, and I used to think the Germans watch these as well, like Saving Private Ryan. Do you get Germans watching? And I think they probably do.
I think they do.
That.
I think they're very open. I think the modern Germans are very open to discuss it and sort of like and talk about it from their perspective. Yeah, but I just if I go to Germany, just don't raise the issue.
Well, no,
swerve it. Just don't talk about it.
When my bro was working in Austria, and I'm not conflating Germany and Austria here, but obviously they were sort of allied for the Second World War. He used to snowboard in a camo jacket, and he'd be walking through town, and he said on multiple occasions, like an old lady had crossed the road to be in front of him, and then stop in front of him and just spit on the floor and then walk off. And it's places where they've got legitimate issues with neo-Nazi groups, and camouflage is kind of a uniform for neo-Nazi groups.
How did she even see him?
Well, precisely. He wasn't wearing snow camo. That was the problem. It wasn't white. But yeah, it's mad that there are still major issues in smaller, not smaller, but sort of like more out there parts of Europe, more small town.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying, the majority of the population are good people. It's the small percentage that ruin it for everyone as well. So
and that sins of our fathers thing that he was getting at, the original sin, you've got to let it go after a certain point, haven't you? You've got to remember, it's got to be taught so it never happens again.
Correct.
But you're not responsible for the sins of your granddad or great-granddad and stuff, as long as you're living correct now.
Yeah. It's interesting, like you say.
Yeah, plus they make good cars. Not that I'd know.
Very good cars.
Yeah.
Hope you guys enjoyed that too. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll catch you on the next
Cheers,
one.
guys.